was bellhopping at the Roosevelt Hotel, where old Huey P. and the boys were living so well. One day I said, "Excuse me, Governor, why don't you tip?" And he just smiled at me and he said, "That's politics. That's politics.
That's politics.
That's politics.
That's politics.
That's politics.
That's politics.
Ain't gonna be no dirty tricks. You know you wanna get your ticket fixed. Oh, that's politics."
Welcome back to That's Politics. We're here in New Orleans, Louisiana, and Louisiana is a great state, a great country, America. Everybody from World Wide Web and watching our show, we thank you for doing that. Today's show, we have a special guest, John Couvillon, who's a terrific pollster. He'll be giving us the insights of the patterns of elections recently here in Louisiana and nationwide. So without further oop-oop-a-doo, let's go watch the show. Welcome back to the show. I want to say hello, Jeff. Good to have you again back. I would like to also say I'm a little perturbed that I was not allowed to go in the spaceship with all those ladies. I followed the application. I identified myself as a transgender woman, yet I was rejected.
You missed out on spending quality time with Gayle King.
I know. I just was trying to hit on Bezos' fiance.
Right. She's taken, though.
No, I'm just kidding here. Well, Jeff, we have a very special guest, don't we?
Yes, and we're excited to bring on someone that I've known for a long time, one of the renowned pollsters in our area based in Baton Rouge. His company is JMC Analytics and Polling, and we welcome John Couvillon to the program. And John, how are you, sir? Welcome.
Really good. Thanks for having me on your show today.
Well, we're going to start by talking about some state politics, and then we'll get into some of the national issues. But, you know, a few weeks ago, boy, the governor took a drubbing in the all the amendments went down to defeat, but it was like a 2-to-1 vote. Should he be concerned, John?
In the short term, yes. The way I look at this massive defeat is basically it's a failure of several things. The first is, number one, those promoting the governor's plan waited way too late to do positive messaging on it. In other words, 80,000 out of 600,000 had already voted by the time I had saw my first TV ad. Number two, allowing the other side to deliver a negative message, which went unanswered for a month, I think was another big mistake. And when you combine that with the fact that Democrats are already in a bad mood and revved up, and they voted far in excess of their numbers, those things spelled a massive defeat. And by the way, it was not just a George Soros thing, as only 14 out of 64 parishes voted for the amendments. And by the way, Jefferson Parish, as was the case with St. Bernard Parish and St. Charles, voted strongly against the amendment, and it got an infinitesimally small margin of support in St. Tammany. So you can't hope to win statewide if you're underperforming in just those parishes, to name a few.
Let me ask one more, Bernie, and then turn it over to you. So what I thought was interesting is that this is one of those rare occasions where you had the left and the right coming together. And usually for these amendments, you know, the turnout is like super low, 10%, 11%, but it was double what it normally is. So it really was interesting that you had that kind of dynamic at play, John.
Correct. It was a 20% statewide turnout. And the thing that was interesting, to kind of use an exhibit A of the strong Democratic turnout that we saw, it was actually 30% in Orleans Parish. Very rarely do I ever see Orleans Parish turnout exceeding statewide turnout. So when you have the deadly duo of, number one, unified and robust Democratic opposition, and number two, a split in the ranks of the Republicans where a substantial number of them either were A, confused, or B, believed that their churches were going to be taxed, that was a toxic combination in terms of wanting to get the amendments passed, whereas all they had to do is just stick to a few simple bullet points about what the amendments, specifically Amendment 2, sought to accomplish.
You know, John, I think one of the critical things is, as a consultant for several decades now, you never forsake the early vote anymore. You've got to
Correct.
focus on the early vote. Usually it determines the outcome. Many cases of 35-40% of people come out now. So would you suggest that they made a critical mistake there? I know you mentioned it. I think they totally did.
Unequivocally, yes. And the thing about it is nowadays, not just the fact that 30% had early voted in this election and nearly 50% voted in the previous presidential elections, there's really 3 election days you have to consider as a political consultant. The first, of course, is Election Day. The second is the 7 days of in-person early voting we have. But a third actor in the play that has started becoming prominent ever since 2020 is mail-in voting. More specifically, those mail-in ballots go out a month or so before Election Day, and you have people who, out of force of sheer habit, will vote those mail ballots the moment they get them. So when I'm talking about the 80,000 who had already voted statewide by the time I saw the first TV ad, a large quotient of that included mail-in ballots. And the unfortunate reality is they were voting based on incomplete or perhaps no information about the amendments.
So actually, John, you're saying here we had a huge paradigm shift since the 20s, right?
Correct.
That being said, there has to be more focus on early voting and who's voting early. Obviously, the people who are voting early don't want to go to the polls.
Early voting is one of those kinds of things that it's a very binary choice, as in either you want to stick to voting on Election Day, or once you've started early voting and you realize how convenient it is, you tend to want to change your behavior in that manner. If you are designing an effective media campaign for the amendments, in my opinion, you should have started in early March, because you could do several things. Number one, reach the mail-in voters. Number two, put positive messaging in the back of the heads of those in-person early voting. And number three, setting the positive table, so to speak, for those wanting to Election Day vote. But you certainly don't wait until early voting is in progress to start doing any advertising when the opposition had a several weeks head start opposing the amendments. And it wasn't just the Republicans. One of the things I saw on Facebook, just to use one example, there was a very simplistic Facebook site saying vote no on all y'all. And even though it's kind of silly to hear that, those kinds of simple little catchy phrases are what catches people's attention, as opposed to listening to a TV ad about why you should vote for Amendment 2, not to mention Amendments 1, 3, and 4.
That campaign was all over New Orleans. You had yard signs everywhere, for folks just to vote no for all of them. Real quick before we go into some national issues, John, does this spell trouble for the governor's agenda in the legislative session? I saw some polling that shows pretty much he's split as far as approval, disapproval. I know the Democrats are fired up against him, but seems to have lost some of the conservative base as well.
In the short term, I agree with your statement, because so much of politics is built on perception. If, let's say, you come off of a first primary victory, in the short term, you're thought of as being all powerful and invincible, and that certainly gives you the momentum to get things passed on your agenda in your first year. But if you have a defeat like this in your second year, and by the way, going back in time, Buddy Roemer suffered a massive defeat in 1989 in the second year of his term with fiscal reform. And so when you have a major speed bump like that, all of a sudden the cloak of invincibility is off, and that means you have to work extra hard to get recalcitrant legislators to vote for your proposals. So yes, in the short term, I would very much agree that this was not a defeat that he wanted to have. I don't see it as insurmountable, provided that he's willing to learn from his lessons and move on.
I think Governor Landry's pretty much an anomaly in the sense that he's willing to take on very controversial issues like the 10 Commandments mandate and stuff like that. So I really don't think he cares as much about that. I think he's putting out his agenda, which is very close to President Trump's in many ways, and conservative, we are a red state, that he's gone to that location. And this being a situation where you had a combination of the left and the right kind of working together, that doesn't work too good.
It doesn't, but one thing that I do think did not have to be this way was the opposition from the right aspect of what you're saying. And to give you a perfect example, messaging-wise, the moment that you had religious conservatives beating their drums against Amendment 2, if I were advising the governor, I would have told him to immediately find 5 religious types like preachers and pastors and so forth and get them to cut and add for the amendments, maybe even make some reference to bearing false witness against your neighbor. But point being is, you didn't have to have the right opposing the amendments because that's your base.
Let's talk a little bit about some national issues, John. So we got, of course, President Trump aggressively pushing forward his agenda, and some poll numbers sort of all over the place. I saw one where he was underwater, another one where he had a nice approval rating. From your analysis, where does he stand right now with the American people 3 months into his second term?
So there's 2 aspects to your question. The first is the poll numbers. When I went to Real Clear Politics yesterday, his approval, disapproval was about 3 points underwater. I took a look at the specific pollsters who were included in that average, and those pollsters showed Kamala Harris. If we looked at how they did their 2024 polling, those pollsters would have shown Kamala Harris with a 1-point lead. So where I'm going with this is, if I see a -3 approval rating and the pollsters are off by several points as evidenced by their past performance, in my mind, Trump is being understated by several percentage points with regards to his approval rating. So the true answer is I think he's more 50-50, which has always been the case with anything regarding Donald Trump. The second part of what you're saying is we do have to appreciate that the 2 things that Donald Trump was given a mandate to do, because it was the focus of his campaign, is what I would say I, immigration and inflation. Anything you're doing agenda-wise that adheres to those 2 points is what needs to be focused and not get distracted with other things. With the case of immigration, right now it's being tied down by unfavorable judicial rulings. That, to me, could easily become a campaign issue. With inflation, to me, you have to talk about what DOGE is trying to do with regards to bringing inflation under control. So in other words, never take your eye off the ball as to what voters really elected you to do.
Well, I think, John, as far as the immigration goes, he's got all the boots on the ground, and Tom Homan, the czar, if you will, they don't like calling him that, but that's what he is. They're doing a bang-up job, and they're bringing out all the bad guys real fast. So there's no argument there. That's something that you can see the issue attention cycle is very prevalent. Whereas inflation, it doesn't happen overnight. So with the tariff situation, which is people very confused about it, what's going on with it, and Trump has to lay that out in the big dynamics of it, the long picture. It's not going to happen overnight. So they're 2 different things. So that's what you're pretty much dealing with. And the other thing is, when it comes to pulling on Trump, you still have Trump derangement syndrome so bad people are scared to admit the fact they're even with Trump if they are.
You're correct. Now, to take what you're saying, and I will put it into a hyper-political context. So with regards to immigration, and I had made reference to unfavorable judicial rulings and so forth, to me, what Trump needs to be able to do is when you have stunts like a Democratic senator from New Jersey going down to El Salvador to stand up for an MS-13 person, that to me absolutely should be the messaging point of the day that, hey, we're trying to solve the border problems. We have boots on the ground. However, we have judges and senators who are trying to obstruct our agenda, and we need more Republicans who favor strong border policies. Let the Democrats' behavior become a focus of next year's campaign. Now, with regards to inflation, I agree with you about it takes time. I think you have to have communication with the American public about, in the short term, this is happening and it's going to cause some pain, but here's the longer term good that we're trying to achieve, and that is lower inflation and prosperity.
Well, I mean, I saw some recent numbers. We already have no inflation. I mean, the prices went down in the last month. So, I mean, I think he's made tremendous strides there. Now, the tariffs could lead to some trouble. We'll see. But as far as this situation with immigration and these Democrats running down to El Salvador, I cannot see how that is a popular thing nationwide, maybe among their base, but it's really sort of a very left-wing bunch of talking points that they have.
Maybe if those Democratic senators, especially the guy from Maryland, maybe if they got a chance to visit close, intimately in the cells with these guys, they'd understand more about what the problem is. Maybe a conjugal visit, if you will.
Well, in fact, that brings up a very good point when you're talking about these actions that are being done and or a lack of attention to the border, that in itself can become a campaign issue. You have to be able to have the messaging to fight back at the opposition that is percolating right now over Donald Trump's policies.
It's going to be fascinating, as we always see with Donald Trump. The fired up supporters, but the opponents, the people with Trump derangement syndrome, they are a spectacle. Quite a spectacle.
One's getting paid and the other ones are not.
Right. All right. Thank you, John. Appreciate your insight. We got a lot more coming your way, folks. Hang on. We'll be right back.
Well, we're back, and we want to thank Pollster John Couvillon for his insightful analogy, if you will, in comparison to what's going on with the different elections in Louisiana with statewide and national politics. We'll have him back another time. But right now it's time for the bad, and the bad obviously is really bad. A lot of bad going on right now, Jeff. And first of all, I want to say, we all know the infamous quote, "Nobody is above the law." No one is above the law. Well, Letitia James, the Attorney General for New York, obviously does not live by her words.
She went after Donald Trump on a bunch of ridiculous charges, okay, claiming that he overinflated his property values, which actually were underinflated. So, and he's a businessman. Nobody lost any money. It was a ridiculous prosecution. So he, of course, was her target. She said she wanted to get Donald Trump. That was what she campaigned on, and she went after Donald Trump. Now it turns out, we're finding out that Letitia James is involved in some lying concerning her own properties. She has a 5-unit apartment building that she characterized as 4 units. Which is for tax benefits.
Which is fraud.
Which is fraud. And then she claimed that her primary residence is in Virginia when she is a New York Attorney General. So we have 2 cases where she theoretically committed crimes, committed fraud, and this is the woman who is holier than thou going after Donald Trump for all these years. So I would say it's a perfect example of hypocrisy, Bernie.
Well, it reminds me, we had a client not too long ago in a mayoral race I was running who made the mistake of registering one of her homes in the French Quarter. And when she represented the North Shore, well, we made a point of that. And basically her retort was that she used it as a parking spot to get into the French Quarter. Well, needless to say, she lost. So that being said, Letitia James, she is totally a fraud.
Right.
And the mere fact that she wants to call her father, her husband, in a document, that's ancestral too.
And that reminds us of Ilhan Omar.
Yes.
Who married her
She married her
husband.
brother.
Her brother.
So
called her brother her husband.
Right.
And was able to, work around the laws and get herself into this country.
Also, he could get into the country by being a naturalized citizen.
And I think she should be thrown out of the country. I mean,
no doubt. Well, first of all, she should be kicked out of Congress.
Exactly.
Gone. Bye.
And she's also, her affiliation is with Somalia, not the United States. That's where her allegiance is.
And she said that overtly.
She said it, exactly.
Yeah, she has to go. She has to go.
Yeah.
The other thing we found recently was the Clinton Foundation, which has hundreds of millions of dollars that they get, even from USAID, right?
Mm-hmm.
USAID, that Chelsea Clinton got like $82 million.
Right. The Clinton Foundation, Bernie, as our viewers know, has been a foundation that's been scamming people out of money for years. They bring in big money. They actually use that money for salaries and perks, and very little goes to the victims. Like Haiti is a perfect example of where the Clinton Foundation brought in lots of money. Very little went to people that were actually in need. This is a foundation that worked well when, the Clintons were in power. Once Hillary Clinton lost the 2016 election,
his speech fees went down pretty substantially.
and donations to the Clinton Foundation went down. So people were doing it to gain access, Bernie. And that's what it was all about. It was a money grab.
And that's really the problem in American politics. Well, actually politics all over the world. People pay, they pay to play. And with the Clintons, they pay a lot. And subsequently, we have what we have.
And then the Clintons claim Donald Trump is doing some wrongdoing when they themselves are the one doing it, like Russian collusion. Hillary was involved in Russian collusion. So
She paid for the whole thing,
Right.
financed the Russian collusion with the fraudulent Pfizer report. The deep state is deeper than you want to believe. And people, on the left, they deny the deep state.
And target number one for the deep state, Bernie, as we know, is Donald Trump. And
Donald J. Trump.
Donald J. Trump is the target for the deep state. They've never had somebody go after them like Donald Trump. And I just interviewed somebody on my radio show the other day who's saying he believes Donald Trump is still in danger because of the fact that he's gone after the deep state. And this was a former
doubt about it.
congressman.
They're scared to death
Right.
because he's going after them. You got Letitia now is going to have Alvin Bragg is coming, baby. So they're all going to end up paying the piper here because they never thought they would lose because they've controlled the power so long, manipulating power, bringing young people in, paying for protesters, causing riots, bringing attention. That's their whole MO. All financed by George Soros and the other oligarchs, if you will. That gets me. AOC and Bernie are out there making speeches. Stop the oligarchs. That's what we need to do. Stop those oligarchs. When he's a multimillionaire, he's got 3 freaking houses.
Well, and you know, when he bowed out for Hillary Clinton, he got another vacation house, and then he bowed out for Joe Biden. I mean, this is a guy who claims he's a fighter, but whenever the Democrats tell him to step aside, he does. He gets a deal, and then he steps aside, and then he rails against Republicans.
If we keep focusing on things that are deterrents or distractions instead of the real issues, the truth, we're never going to get to the deep state. But that's their
So
MO.
it's going to be incumbent upon Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, the Trump administration, to really start arresting some of these people, really start making sure that the American people know that there are consequences for what they did. And right now, so far, they've gotten away with it, Bernie, because I haven't seen any arrests. So we'll see. Letitia James might be the first one if this actually turns out to be
I sure hope
some
so.
kinds of prosecution. But I think a lot of people are wanting to see something from the DOJ for all these people that went after Donald Trump for so long.
And when you get back to the Clintons, and I got 2 letters from the president. I worked for Bill Clinton in his campaign. Supporting. He sent me a nice letter when I did Rock Against Racism, and I really believed in him. I didn't really care much about the Monica Lewinsky stuff. I mean, I was a young guy. Things happen. But that being said, but you notice in the Clinton situation, all the people were dropping dead left and right. So I got one quick question. What happened to Obama's chef?
Yeah, well, there's so many, there's so many things that just don't add up, not just in that case, but everything from his birth certificate, everything to, how he got in the position that he was in. And then you look at Joe Biden, and then the question of, well, who was running the Biden administration, Bernie, during the 4 years Joe Biden was supposed to
I think it was the doctor.
Right.
She was.
Maybe it was Hunter, maybe it was Dr. Jill, maybe it was Obama.
Well, it's all interesting stuff, and we'll always continue exposing the deep state and all the bad things in politics. And don't forget, we got hope.
We got hope, and we got somebody that's finally taken on the deep state.
Amen.
First time ever in Donald J. Trump.
A guy who is, by all practical purpose, one of them, a wealthy guy who's a populist, who knows about the working man and understands him, whereas the Democratic Party that I grew up with and my father and grandfathers were, they were the working man's party.
Everything is switched. The Democrat is the elite party now, the country club party, and the Republican is the working class party, thanks to Donald Trump.
I don't know if they're just the country club party, they're more the Epstein Island party. And we're waiting for that list.
That's another one, exactly.
But we'll be right back with more stuff from That's Politics. People always ask me, Bernie, is AOC and Bad Bernie a threat to democracy? I say absolutely. They project an image of autonomy, but when they are nothing but false prophets being puppeteers from the shadows of the corporate elite, media, and political establishment. They criticize the so-called oligarchs, yet they are the titans of propaganda of Hollywood and the affluent billionaires who trade inside deals on Wall Street, which covertly finance their political endeavors. Like the leaders of the Chinese and Russian Communist parties, they too enjoy the trappings of elite million-dollar mansions and servants to keep them insulated from the real world. Not earned, but stolen by corporate officials. Their true ambition is to dismantle our economy and ensnare the impressionable youth, luring them into their mean-spirited ideological web. Can we allow George Soros to undermine our country? Well, they want to. It's worth recalling that the Communist Party in America once thrived, boldly showcasing its influence by hosting political conventions. They even honored figures like Abraham Lincoln, who, believe it or not, in his documented memoirs, was sympathetic to the ideas of his contemporary friend Karl Marx. Some people said they were pen pals in the early 19th century. Today, the state-run media of our enemies is foreign dictatorships who become potent weapons of bias in America. The good news is the vast majority of the voting public does not buy into their rhetoric and false prophecies. Our government under President Trump's plan is to rebuild our nation, restore the principles of peace and tranquility, not a party of violent criminals who use riots with paid protesters who don't even know why they're protesting. Yet they are waving propagandist paraphernalia full of misinformation and misery. President Trump tells it like it is. And the delusion of the radical left who think that boys who claim to be women should be allowed to beat up on girls unequally fitted to compete in physical competition? This is crazy. Or the alien convicted criminals who receive preferential treatment over our own citizens who follow the laws. The illogical reasoning is antithetical to the common sense and the very laws of nature. My friends, that's why they will never succeed without the ability to convert righteous minds to the delusionment of their warped beliefs. We can thank God America will always be a beacon of freedom, engraved by our Constitution, not by the twisted, corrupt politicians. In the last 4 years of Biden administration, we witnessed an American nightmare created by the Democratic Party. I once loved for its dedication to the working class and educated Americans who built this country into the best nation in the world. The good news is we're coming back stronger than ever. Let's keep it that way. This is Bernie Cyrus. I'm signing off for today's show. We want to thank you for watching. We want to thank our guest, John Couvillon, the great pollster, as well as my co-reporter, Jeff Crouere, and all those who make this show what it is, and we think you enjoy it too. We'll be back next time for That's Politics. See you later, alligator.